very much. I've had such a warm reception since I came. I want to thank you all for your hospitality. You know, we pride ourselves in Hawaii having the aloha spirit, but I think you've outdone us. And I want to thank the forum for having us, having me. Ron, thank you very much. And Turner for sponsoring me. And I was so surprised to find an old friend from Honolulu at the helm at Turner, Tom Leppert. Tom was one of the leaders in our community. In fact, there are a lot of people who wanted to make him the governor of Hawaii. So great to see you, and wonderful again to be here. You know, I have to admit right off the bat, I'm not an architect, okay? I'm a scientist. And, you know, I have to also be honest, I am probably the biggest supporter of architects that you will ever find. And it wasn't always that way. I grew up, my dad was a contractor. And until I was a teenager, I thought architect was an obscenity, actually, because he'd come home at night and I knew architect was one of those words and I knew what the other ones meant. So I just assumed, and it wasn't until later in life when I went to work for the city that I really learned of the incredible contribution that architects can make to American society. And I believe that you have a huge responsibility to step up and become leaders in articulating a new urban vision for our country so that we can start taking a leadership role in building sustainable cities. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. You know, I am a scientist, and I travel the world. I do work on coral reefs for the World Bank, a whole variety of things. I have to tell you, every ecosystem on the planet is in decline. We are in trouble, folks. And I think we're at a defining moment in human civilization. I think the actions that we take over the next 10 years are literally going to determine the fate of human society and how we actually proceed. And whatever the metrics are you want to use. You know, we have huge desertification problems. Deserts are marching across the face of the planet. We have over 1 billion people in over 110 countries facing the onslaught of deserts. We have huge problems with water. While fossil fuels have been the natural resource of international conflict today and in our generation, it's water that's going to be the natural resource of international conflict in the next 10 to 20 years to come. We have already a 500 million people who live in water short situations today. In the next 20 years, that number is going to go up to 4 billion. Staggering problems. And of course, we don't make it any better. We're dumping some 450 square kilometers of waste into the potable water that we have. Just think of that, the volume of waste that we're polluting those limited water sources. And of course, biodiversity. More species are threatened with extinction today than have been in 65 million years. And I'm ashamed to say that the extinction capital of the planet is Hawaii. And again, we'll talk more about the problems and the mistakes that we've made. One of our fundamental mistakes, obviously, is that we have built our society and certainly our cities around fossil fuels. Our transportation systems, our primary energy systems, the electricity that we use to run our society comes from fossil fuels. And we talk a lot about renewable energy. You can't open a magazine without hearing about all this being done with renewable energy. The fact is, our reliance on fossil fuels is increasing, not decreasing. We're going to double our demand for primary energy in the world every 28 years. In Asia, where I do a lot of work now, it's every 12 years we're doubling the demand for that energy. And of course, that's resulting in unprecedented levels of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide levels are the highest they've been in 600,000 years. And we know there's a direct correlation between carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere and the temperature, the global temperature. And so we have the global warming problem. And along with the increased intensity of cyclonic storms and the rise in sea level, we're going to face enormous problems with agricultural production, disease, and all the rest that come with it. You know, the scientists at the University of Hawaii have used our city's GIS system. In fact, it's the School of Architecture that partnered with the Sea Grant College to look forward 85 years at where the sea level will be with even a conservative increase in sea level resulting from the conservative numbers with global warming. This is a little corner of our island, Oahu. That peninsula you see is Waikiki. That's the economic engine of the state. The conservative estimate that the scientists have made as to the new waterfront in 85 years is that. Well, obviously, if that happens, we face economic disaster as well as all the societal problems that come with it. And if you envision that impacting around the world with other coastal cities, you get an idea of the scope of the problem that may be facing us. A lot of the problem, of course, is because our transportation systems are based on fossil fuels. And we know that the problem is getting worse. We're going to have 1 billion cars on the road by 2025. But the biggest problem, the largest contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions comes not from cars, but from buildings. And this is why architects have such an important role to play. It's the built environment that's the main culprit. We haven't built our cities, we haven't built our buildings in a sustainable way. And this is something we can solve. We don't need to cut down old growth forests to generate wood products for construction. There is a better way. And so focusing on green building design is vital. There is no reason why any building built in this country from now on is anything but done with green design. That includes the materials, the energy efficient design, a distributed energy system so that buildings are providing more and more of their own energy, less reliant on energy from the grid generated by fossil fuels. And if you look at the core of the problem, you realize that the whole paradigm that we've been living under is flawed. We've been living under the assumption that you can have unlimited consumption of natural resources and generate an unlimited amount of waste and that the earth can absorb it. Well, we know we live in a finite system. Obviously, there isn't an infinite amount of resources, and obviously, and it's becoming more obvious every day, the earth can't absorb an infinite amount of waste. The reality is our economy is based on fraudulent accounting. And we've got to get this right if we're going to get anything right. We don't consider the true environmental and social costs of the products that we develop and the developments that we do. We don't consider environmental services. We will cut down a woodland surrounding a city, not realizing that woodland is providing watershed services, it's providing inhibitors to erosion, all these things we put no value on. And yet those are valuable services that are being provided to the city and the community. We need to start interpreting that and valuing those services. We need to start considering life cycle costing, realizing that we can't just look in 2- and 4-year increments. We have to look at the long-term costs of the decisions that we make. And we also have to start internalizing the real costs. When we buy a car, we're not paying for all the environmental problems that went in the construction of the mining of the materials, the fabrication. We're not paying for the disposal of the car once it's used and has to be thrown away. All those costs have to be analyzed. And we have to start looking at triple bottom line, not just the number, the dollar number, but the societal costs, the cultural costs, the environmental costs. Sometimes they're hard to quantify, but they're real. We have to start valuing those things. Now, the real challenge that we face is, as members of the developed world, we represent 20% of the world's population. And as our 20%, we've been consuming 80% of the world's resources. Well, the other 80% of the world's population is now becoming urbanized at an alarming rate. And as they urbanize, they want to assume the same kind of quality of life. They want to become consumers. They want automobiles. Spend some time in Shanghai or Beijing and see the cars that are just piling up on the streets. Everybody who is becoming an urbanite wants to be a consumer of resources. Well, do the numbers. If 20% of us are using 80% of the resources and the other 80% want to use resources at the same level, obviously the numbers don't work. We're facing serious challenges. And the question is, how are we going to get this developing world through this transition to enjoy a reasonable quality of life without it destroying all of us? The reality is that we've got to find ways to make better use of the resources. We've got to find ways to live sustainably. And you know, I had the chance to have lunch with Chiang Zemin when he was president of China, and we talked about these things. And he said, well, you know, Mr. Mayor, there are people in my administration who say America had its chance to pollute, and now it's China's turn. Well, what do you say to that? Oh, no. Do as we say, not as we do. The reality is, we're not providing the leadership. We should be providing the model for how a society urbanizes and grows and improves the quality of life without doing it in an unsustainable way. And the fact is we're not. When you look at the problem, you realize it's a problem about cities. It's all about cities. We live in the urban era. Half the people in the world live in cities. And we're adding 60 million people a year to our cities. Think of the challenge. That's like having to build a new San Francisco from scratch every 5 days. Let alone the fact that most of the world's cities aren't sustainable now. So the issue is, how do we build sustainable cities? Well, a lot of people look at the urban areas, they think, oh my God, it's impossible to make this transition. The first thing I think we have to realize is that most of the cities that will exist on this planet in 25 years are now vacant land. They're vacant land. It's a blank palette. There is no excuse for us to develop those urban areas in an unsustainable way. We know what needs to be done. We know how to use green building design. We know how to develop sustainable systems. We have to start doing it. We can retrofit the existing cities over a period of time, to be sure, but what we do from now on better be done right. And we have to start viewing cities as systems. What we've done is we've looked at them as stovepipes. There's land use, and that's completely separate from transportation, and that's completely separate from energy, and that's completely separate from utilities, when in fact they are all integrated. You make a decision in one, it affects all the rest. So we need to take a systems approach. In fact, we have to start modeling cities after natural ecosystems, which are great models of how you have many different components, interactive parts that all work together and affect each other. It's all about sustainable design. It's about bringing good, holistic, sustainable design to the urbanization that's happening. The question is, who's going to do this? Who's going to lead? Who out there is even articulating a new urban vision for this nation so that we can become leaders? No one is. I think it's the responsibility and the opportunity for the design profession to step up and assume that leadership role. I think it's time to redefine the profession of architecture. Right now, architecture is defined with a small a. Architects are focused on building the iconic building. When we do focus groups with the community, they vision architects as only concerned about the iconic building. When we ask community members, are architects concerned about the community? The answer is a resounding no. Architects have no interest in the community. I think that's wrong. I think architects have an incredible interest in the community. I think architects need to start redefining their profession with the big A. I think architects have to start being responsible not just for the iconic building, but the context in which it's set, the neighborhood in which it's located, the energy systems that serve it, the utilities that serve it, the transportation systems. In other words, architects need to take the leadership role in the design process and in the entire built environment. I think that's the challenge, and I think architects and the design professionals are the ones that can step up and meet that challenge. Architects need to become builders of communities, not builders of iconic buildings. And I just wanted to share a few examples of the architects in my community and what they've done, because they have really done an amazing, amazing amount, contributed to the future of our city. And admittedly, our city is unusual. It's the entire island of Oahu, over 600 square miles. It's a population of about 1 million people. And there are no other jurisdictions or townships or anything like that, so it's one political jurisdiction. And I have to tell you, we did everything wrong that you could possibly do. If there was a mistake you could make, we made the mistake. Urban sprawl, fossil fuel-based energy systems, transportation systems, everything we did wrong. And what we've started to do now is try to turn our island, our community, in a new direction, a more sustainable direction. And we realized early on, if we were going to do that, we had to involve the community in the process. That it couldn't just be a top-down effort. We had to get the public changing their attitudes, focused on a more sustainable future. And so we started what we called the 21st Century Oahu, a vision, shared vision for the future. And we began by, first of all, coming up with a vision. Early on in my first term, I got a call from the president of the AIA in Washington. They're coming to town to give me an award. And I thought, well, he's heard of the great urban design work I've been doing. No, the award was for hiring more architects than any other mayor in American history. But in politics, you take awards where you can get them. But I basically filled all the positions that were typically filled by engineers, civil engineers. I filled them with architects. Managing director of the city, the planning and permitting, the design and construction, all architects. And we came up, we spent a couple of months, and we came up with a vision for our island. And we illustrated it with beautiful renderings, and we put it into a half-hour primetime TV show. And we showed it over and over again on the TV so everybody would see it. And then we invited people to come to the convention center to participate in developing the vision. Because we said it's not important what our vision is. What's important is what is your vision? Come and participate. And they did. Huge, 1,000 more people. And we started the discussion. We started the dialogue. And we realized there wasn't a shared vocabulary. So we gave every person there a camera, a disposable camera. And we said, go out and take pictures of what you like in your community and take pictures of what you don't like. And then come to your neighborhood meeting next week to start the discussion of forming a sustainable vision for your neighborhood. And they did. They took thousands of pictures. And the architects and the urban designers were able to start translating, looking at the pictures, put all the things that they didn't like on one wall. You see what you don't like? That's because of this. These are the design principles that you're responding to. And so we started this process of raising the capacity of the citizens of our city. And the critical component were the design professionals. Architects, landscape architects, urban planners formed volunteer vision design assistance teams. And each one of the neighborhoods on the island had a team of volunteer architects and professionals helping them visualize and articulate and plan out a vision for their neighborhoods. One of the first things we realized that we'd done wrong was land use. We had done the typical mistake of developing our zoning so it promoted urban sprawl. People living here on this side of the island and working on the other side of the island. And then, of course, having to tie together with freeways. And so we realized we had to start building our city around people instead of around automobiles. We also recognized that we had to start using smart growth instead of urban sprawl. We had to start encouraging higher density mixed use development so that people could live and work and shop within a smaller radius with less reliance on the automobile. And that we needed to protect our agricultural space and our open space, and that we had to start paying attention to urban design. We had allowed just anything to happen. Whoever wanted to build what, whenever, and it was becoming a polyglot. Our tourist industry in Waikiki was starting to fail because it had lost all sense of place. You'd come to Waikiki, you would expect to be visiting Hawaii, you would expect to experience authentic Polynesia. Instead, you got polyglot anywhere USA. And so, a new focus on design. And this is what we were encouraging. Just subdivision sprawl across our agricultural land. That's an old sugarcane field. And so we developed sustainable community plans in each of the neighborhoods around the island. Again, with grassroots support, setting up urban growth boundaries, points past which we wouldn't allow any further urbanization, protecting agricultural lands and open space, and using tools, technology that allowed the public to understand and participate and engage in the design process. Every neighborhood had a smart board and SketchUp software so that a citizen, a regular citizen with his finger, after 20 minutes of training, could stand up side by side with the architect and help design the new community center or the new downtown urban block, whatever it was. They could simply visualize the ideas that were being expressed and understand what it was going to feel like and look like and what the shadow lines were going to be and the view planes were going to be. And we used our GIS system. We developed an enterprise-wide GIS system. So every department, every activity of the city was tied into this geographic information system that gave us an enormous tool. And so simply with the use of the mouse, anybody, any citizen could come into the city, could fly through the city from any elevation, from any direction. They could envision a proposal for a development project, perhaps, or fly the alignment of a suggested rapid transit route, and envision what the view planes would be like and envision the impact of a proposal on the fabric of our community. They could fly down to the street level and see what the landscaping would be like. They could understand the context of the different ideas, the different future scenarios. They could stop at a building and fly in the window virtually of the building and call up the floor plan. And of course anything else, the construction plans, the soil types, the sewage systems, the police beats, whatever it was, all within a fingertips reach of any citizen. And so these volunteer teams of architects help these communities come up with these visions, these ideas for how they could transform their communities, how they could take communities that had oriented, strip commercial against waterfront and transform those into vibrant, mixed-use residential areas. Take areas that had really ignored the water and find ideas for how those areas could be transformed and made to be more livable communities. And they looked at our existing neighborhoods that had lost all sense of place, all identity, had been the homogenized USA. And they looked at how they could recapture some of that special sense of place and make these communities more livable with architectural guidelines for infill development, requirements for urban landscaping. And then they looked at how they could transform these concepts into actual urban design guidelines so that developers would have some guidelines to go by as they did projects, so that they would fit in with the vision of transforming these neighborhoods to be more pedestrian friendly, built for people instead of cars. Looked at ideas of how to deal with big boxes, so instead of having a blank wall for 2 blocks long, how you could require there to be small shops along the street with the big box buried inside. Ways to change big parking lots on the street to more like neighborhood streets. And planting trees. Probably there's nothing more important to increase the livability of a community than planting trees. And we planted thousands and thousands of trees, becoming Tree City, USA. In some cases, doing the outlandish thing of actually tearing out parking spaces and tearing out roadways and planting trees. Now, I know it's completely un-American. I mean, anything against the car is, un-American. I was once sued for overforestation. I said, I'm guilty. Take me away. They wanted me to file an environmental impact statement for planting trees, but transformational to a city. Old concrete blank walls, softened and landscaped, beautifying entryways into our downtown. And looking at ways to take these corridors, these arterials, and coming up with ideas so that when future development takes place, it helps to improve the livability of the area instead of, again, promoting simply the automobile culture. And of course, probably the most important thing was trying to find ways to change the land use laws to promote that smart growth I talked about, the higher density mixed use. So if you have an area such as this, which would be an employment center with say, light industrial, looking at ways at how you could transform that, instead of it being a job destination where somebody had to drive across the island to get to, how could you transform an area like that? So it had the amenities and places for people to live and work and shop for food and become a more livable community. These are the ideas that the public started to get engaged with and see the possibilities. And once you inspire the public, and again, it's architects leading the way, providing the inspiration, being able to help people visualize what the potential is. We also realized our transportation system was a disaster. We had the worst track record of any city in the country. We had gone through the whole process of planning and developing rapid transit systems and rail systems only to lose political will at the end and falter time after time. And we realized that we had to change things. We had to reduce the demand for transportation through things like changing land use laws. But we also had to shift from automobiles to public transit and ideally to renewable energy to power those systems. I'm ashamed to say this is Honolulu. And you know, I admit, the first time I saw that picture, I thought, what god-awful place is that? And then I realized that was my island. Because you never really look at it from that perspective, do you, Tom? I mean, that's an unusual perspective. But that's what it looks like. Again, because of our failed land use and transportation policies. And this is what the road looks like most of the time. It used to be, you know, rush hour 1 hour in the morning, rush hour 1 hour in the afternoon. Now it's pretty much 8 hours a day. Welcome to paradise. And when the trade winds don't blow, that's what the air looks like. And you know, we tell the tourists it's from the volcano. We tell them it's VOG, volcanic smog. And tourists are dumb. They believe anything. And so you have tourists out taking pictures of this and sending it home. You know, oh, look, Mildred, we took a picture of the smoke from the volcano. It's actually the fact that we have 715,000 cars on the road and no wind blowing the pollution away that day. And so we focused on, since we couldn't get a rail system in, we focused on the bus system. And we developed it. It's now recognized as the best transit system in North America. And we developed the beginnings of a hybrid electric bus rapid transit system that serves Honolulu, Waikiki, and downtown Honolulu. And of course, all the other technologies, smart bus technology, video cameras, synchronized traffic lights, all the rest. But the idea was to try to start breaking away from the automobile. Look for every alternative that we could, even simple things like putting bike racks on every bus and promoting the use of bicycles for multimodal transportation, so people could come to work on the bus, bring their bike, use it to get around town during the day, and maybe bike home. And to try to eliminate some of the need for people to drive to downtown, we established a city website. We didn't even have a website back then. Now we're getting 13 million hits a month on the city website for service, registering your car, whatever it happens to be, e-commerce. Again, trying to find ways to reduce the need for people to move. And of course, the bus rapid transit system I talked about. And when we put in the bus rapid transit system, we realized that this was an opportunity to simply do more than provide hybrid electric buses. It was an opportunity to help transform the communities that this transit system went through. This is Waikiki, the residential section of Waikiki, as it was before. Narrow sidewalks dominated by the automobile. And with the bus rapid transit system, we used the opportunity to take out roadway, widen sidewalks, provide meandering walkways, landscaping. Again, before and after, transformational to that area. Before and after. And all these trees have only been there a couple of years, but it transforms the livability of that neighborhood. The third thing that became painfully obvious was we had also done a terrible job with energy. We live in a place that probably has more renewable energy than any place else on the planet. I mean, we've got solar, wind, geothermal, ocean thermal, wave, current, biomass, you name it, we've got it. How do we generate our power? We import coal and fossil fuel and we burn it. It's criminal. It's criminal. And so we realized we had to change that. We also realized that the cheapest kilowatt was a saved kilowatt. So we need to focus on energy efficiency. We also needed to start focusing on getting away from just relying on the grid and developing instead distributed energy systems. Start building buildings that provide their own power and shifting to renewable energy. And so we've started our move in that direction, but we have a long way to go. But it's important, I think, to realize that with all the debate about should America sign the Kyoto protocols or shouldn't it, the reality is it is irrelevant what the national government does. Because it's not the national government that is using fossil fuels. It's the cities that are burning fossil fuels. It's the cities that can determine the fate of our climate and global warming. We're the ones that set energy policy and land use policy and transportation policy. If the cities of America get it right, we will meet Kyoto guidelines and more. It all comes down to our urban development. And so reducing demand for energy, focusing on energy. We passed the Model Energy Code. The experts estimate it was going to save us $300 million in the first 20 years. Green building standards, Energy Star purchasing programs, so whatever was purchased was energy efficient. Even little things like changing out the incandescent light bulb in the traffic signals to put in a light-emitting diode. That one small thing saves us $250,000 a year in our electric bill. And instead of having to send a crew out to change the light bulb every few months, they only have to go out to change the light bulb once every 9 years. Just think of the other savings in labor and cost and energy, fueling the trucks and all the rest. We provide low-interest loans for solar water heating and rebates on if people buy energy-efficient, water-efficient washing machines. You get rebates from the city. And we encourage, obviously, the use of photovoltaics and all the rest. And in communities that I deal with that say, oh, well, we don't have the money to do that. You don't need the money. There are third-party financing companies, ESCOs, that will come in and pay all the costs to upgrade, to transform the building, the city hall or whatever it is, and then they get paid back from the energy savings that you realize. They take their share of those savings. And so there is no reason why cities don't become more energy efficient, less reliant on fossil fuels. And ultimately, of course, we need to shift to renewables. Now, again, one of the small things we did was we converted our entire city fleet, over 1,000 city trucks, like garbage trucks, to biodiesel. And so the garbage truck now runs on used McDonald's French fry oil. I told him at lunch, it smells great when the garbage truck goes by now. It's just, a wonderful French fry smell, but a small thing, but a significant thing. We even field testing lights for parking lots and things like that that aren't tied into the web at all. This is powered with a little photovoltaic cell on top, and that's a little windmill that hangs down, a little wind turbine, and a battery inside. So whenever the breeze is blowing or the sun is shining, the battery is charged, and so the light doesn't have to be plugged in at all. No use of fossil fuels. And of course, distributed energy systems. We put in our own cogeneration power plant at City Hall using waste syngas, and we cut our demand for energy from the grid by 80%, just like that, overnight. Tapping waste gases from sewage treatment plants for methane, for power. Drilling deep water wells near the coast, tapping cold ocean water to reduce our need for fossil fuel powered air conditioning and fresh water for those air conditioning systems. And again, photovoltaics. And then finally we realized we had to do something about our natural resources. We were doing a terrible job with our solid waste and our wastewater, and we realized we had to focus on reuse. We had to start redefining ourselves. Instead of thinking of ourselves as consumers, we have to start thinking of ourselves as users and reusers of resources. And of course, what we can't recycle, turn that into energy. So our recycling program, turning plastics into park benches and bus stops, glass into glassfault to build the roads. And what we can't recycle, the city built a refuse-derived fuel power plant where we take that garbage from yesterday and turn it into the electricity that lights your home today, saving millions of barrels of fossil fuel that don't have to be imported and generating revenue for the city to help pay for its costs of the solid waste program, generating some $26 to $30 million a year from electrical sales. Wastewater treatment, the same thing, putting in ultraviolet disinfection systems, and Synagro, a plant that's about to open that'll recycle the solids of the waste and use those back in the agricultural industry. High technology with unmanned submarines for deep ocean outfalls and robotic cameras to look in sewer lines. But every place we looked, there was an opportunity for a technological application to improve the sustainability and the efficiency of our systems. Even the way we read our water meters, you can imagine an island, 680 square miles, almost 1 million people, having to go out and read the water meter every other month. Enormous job. Now we've just put telemetry on all those meters. So this guy in his car just drives past, and every meter, bing, 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 sends signal to his computer telling him how much water has been used. Allows us to identify leaks more effectively if they have them in the system. And of course, saves lots of money and much more efficient. And again, we provide incentives for low volume use water systems, toilets, and all the rest. And technology, the GIS system. Every one of our manholes and all of our storm drain system now has a barcode on it. So when the blue-collar team goes out to do some maintenance, all they do, they have a little handheld computer, they swipe the barcode, up comes exactly the blueprints, exactly what's happening in that manhole, what was done when, and as soon as they make some improvement, they maybe clean the manhole, they type it in right there in the field, and instantly the entire city knows exactly what's been done in that manhole. There's no question about the maintenance schedule or what has to be done in the future. And finally, we realized that our economy was not in any way run in a sustainable way. This was the tourism industry, complete neglect of the native culture. We were destroying the things that people were coming to see. People come to Hawaii to experience the host culture, the Hawaiian culture, and the multicultural community. They come to experience the beautiful natural environment. And we were polluting the natural environment, and we were cheapening the cultural experience, offering people, plastic hula skirts and the canned luau. And so we needed to find a way to go back and recapture our sense of place and support and promote our culture and protect our environment. And areas like this being redeveloped now. This was the Waikiki of not very many years ago. This is not what people will come around the world to see. They want that sense of place, the identity, the architecture, so important. One of our main tourist centers, this is a volcanic crater collapsed into the ocean, a marine preserve. But this was the architectural experience. I mean, dreadful. So the architects came up with a earth berm structure, a nature learning center that attracts, hundreds of thousands of children each year and visitors and locals alike. But making the architecture contextual and making it a real environmental learning experience, turning it into really a true economic asset as well as an environmental asset. We decided to try to broaden our economy into sports tourism, and so we developed a whole variety of one of the best soccer complexes in the United States, one of the best tennis complexes, baseball, softball, and all the rest. Again, a great asset for our community, but also a great sustainable component of our economy now. And I just want to end by looking at 3 scenarios, 3 examples of how architects made a phenomenal difference. The first is helping build the new second city, the new secondary urban center. We realized that we needed to stop the urban sprawl, and to do that we needed to start focusing the growth of our city to a new secondary urban center and to our downtown, which had a decayed urban core. And so our architects, again leading the way, designed a new city hall in this new secondary urban center, award-winning, a new police station, new fire station, all award-winning projects, creating that critical mass. We developed housing, again, city-sponsored housing, low-income housing, gap group housing, market housing, but built communities. And these are affordable senior rentals, for instance. We took coastline that was old dumps and turned it into meandering walkways and oceanfront water parks where once was just trash heaps. And in the downtown area, we had the same thing happen to our city that most American cities had experienced. People had left the urban core for the subdivisions, and what was left was crime and prostitution and drugs and just a decayed urban core. And we realized we needed to reverse that. We needed to redevelop that urban core. We needed to make it a great, vibrant place for people to live. For that to happen, we had to build places for people to live, opportunities for shops and restaurants to come back in. And so we took every piece of city property, every parking lot. This was a city parking lot, absolutely dead. No vibrancy, no activity, obviously. A dead block full of prostitutes and drug dealers and hypodermic needles every morning. And we started transforming this historic district by going back and recapturing the sense of place of this critical district of Honolulu. Tearing down that parking lot and putting in street front commercial with apartments above and behind a high-rise residential tower. You don't see it as you walk along the street, but it's there to provide the density so that you have the support for the shops and the restaurants and the boutiques. And when old buildings in the historic district burned down, the architects replacing those with appropriate contextual architecture, again, with shops and apartments, and keeping the little alleyways and the creative historic context of turn-of-the-century Honolulu. And it really turned Chinatown into a place that none of us, no decent person, would go in the evening, to a place that is a great place to live and shop, a vibrant place where now tourists are even starting to come to experience the multicultural Asian cultural heritage of our islands. And again, affordable housing. This is an affordable housing tower that the city built with a beautiful urban park across the way, what was once a parking lot. Another affordable housing project. Trying to create that critical mass of people and shops and vibrancy to reestablish the urban core. And the third little vignette about how architects made a difference was with our economy itself, with Waikiki, the economic engine of the entire state. And we had allowed Waikiki to fall into disrepair. It had lost its sense of place. The famous Waikiki beach was really sand that came up to a big highway. And so you laid on the beach and the cars were whizzing just a few feet above your head. And we did again the un-American thing of taking out roadway, bulldozing up roadway and putting in landscaping. I thought they were going to kill me, but it was transformational. Bringing the park into what was simply a stark urban area. This was the experience. This was the cultural experience that you had when you walked the streets of Waikiki. Sure, the clamshell is nice, but otherwise, not much worth driving or flying halfway around the world for. This was the pedestrian experience. You had to actually walk out on the street. The sidewalks were so narrow to handle the number of visitors and locals that we had. These were the restroom facilities on Waikiki Beach. Again, something to be proud of. This was the experience. So we tore all that out. We tore out roadway. We put in meandering walkways. And again, all these projects were AIA Design Award-winning projects. The architects had the vision, were able to stand up and articulate a new vision. In many cases, with overwhelming opposition from various interest groups. But it was transformational. What was roadway became beautiful native landscaping. And you knew we had it right when the landscapers were laying down the sod and the tourists were waiting with their beach mats to put the beach mat down on the sod that had just been laid. You knew they had the design right. And creating, again, little oases, from hanging flower baskets to historic street lights. And we put in a restroom in Waikiki Beach. No one wanted it. They thought, oh, it'll be an eyesore. That's the public restroom in Waikiki Beach. It's not the waterfall exactly, but it's tucked in behind the waterfall. More people get their picture taken here than anywhere else in the islands. And I said this lunch, I don't know if they know they're in front of the public john, but creating places for people. Realizing there's intrinsic value to our historic buildings and saving them. And realizing that cities are about more than simply sidewalks and sewers. They're about culture and civilization. This was our main performance center in Waikiki. It looked like a World War II bunker. I never found, the architect would never step forward who designed it. But you had to bring your own chair and sit in the mud, and who's going to travel? You could be anywhere. Who knows? So the architects went back and found out what was there 100 years ago. It was a Victorian-era bandstand set in a lily pond. And so their modern interpretation of that was this lovely structure set in a lagoon. Again, another AIA award winning. And it is alive with activity now. Cultural events happening all the time. Pumping huge amounts of money into our economy, but also providing a sense of place and reinforcing our culture. providing places for our local artists to perform. Again, every night, thousands of people come. And once a month, we close down the streets for brunch on the beach. And Sunday brunch, we cover the street with AstroTurf, put up hundreds of umbrellas and tables, and great restaurants come out with brunch and entertainment. But it's alive with both locals and visitors alike, sharing an authentic cultural experience. Well, as a result of all these things, as a result of the architects in our community stepping forward, articulating a new urban vision, being willing to donate their time and their energy and their vision and their talent, our city received the award, the Gold Award, for the most livable large city in the planet. And it was because of architects. And so I come to you today to encourage you, anyone who's a member of the design profession, and any community leader who realizes the dire situation that we find ourselves in, who cares about our cities, to step forward. We're at a critical moment in human history. We need someone to step forward and articulate a new urban vision for our cities. And that's why I'm proud to be here. I'm proud of the work that the Architectural Forum is doing, the AIA is doing, and the kind of supportive industry and community leadership that you have here. You have an enormous potential in Dallas. You could become a model, not only for the country, but for the rest of the world. And I want to thank you for the honor of being able to come and talk to you about that tonight. Thank you very much.